Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Gina Hinojosa, and I represent Central Austin in the Texas House. I also sit on the House Public Education Committee. But most importantly, I am a mom with a son in our neighborhood public schools. And so while I do not shy away from partisanship, I do not let it get in the way of doing what is right for our kids and our neighborhood schools. And that's why I am proud to stand here with other moms from across the state and community members, but moms who are Republicans and leaders in their party, in their communities, and in this state. And while there is a lot we don't agree on, I'm sure, like perhaps mask mandates and maybe even who won the 2020 election, I don't know and I don't want to know. There is one thing that we all agree on, and that is that Texas public schools are our strength and our heritage as Texans, and they are dying on the vine due to chronic underfunding in the classroom and to a failure to prioritize what matters, like a great teacher in the classroom and manageable class size. So I filed House Bill 5419, which is a Doge of the Texas Education Agency. It is a zero-based budgeting bill to cut through the nonsense and the bureaucracy and the vendor contracts and reprioritize that money to what matters: teacher pay, school safety, and closing the special education funding gap. I've frequently told the story about how my own son did not get a teacher in the 5th grade because the school district could not find a teacher to work for the pay that it could offer. So it took his full class, split it in half, put half the class in another already full class and the other half in another already full class, and everybody struggled. But my story is a story shared by thousands of parents across this state. We have a teacher exodus in Texas. It is a crisis, and we have to do better. I've also told the story about how my son did not get evaluated for special education for over a year, despite a request from his mother and his teacher. We had to finally find a private service to do that and pay over $2,000. And our special education program in the state is the most underfunded in the whole school finance system. It is underfunded to the tune of $2 billion annually, and that's according to the Texas Education Agency. We must do better by our most vulnerable kids. And that's why, again, I am proud to stand here with these parents and these community members in support of going back to basics, taking care of our kids' real needs, and focusing on investing in our kids in the classroom. I'd like to now invite Lynn Davenport to speak to you about who she is and why she's here.
Thank you, Gina. I'm grateful for this bill. I generally do not support new bills because I want to see us repeal old bills that have come before this session. So I am a former precinct chair for the Republican Party. I served as a delegate in the GOP convention last spring, and I was successful at helping get vouchers bumped from the top priorities of the party to number 9. So it's not even a priority of the party, but that seems to take all of the oxygen out of the room here at the Capitol, is the focus on vouchers and shifting the money away from our public schools into private hands. So I want to speak to the support of this bill is because it will unravel so much of the money that is going to everything but the teachers and the students in the classroom. And this has been happening for decades. Now, I got involved about 10 years ago. I would come before the legislature and I would speak against bills that I could see they were vendor bills. And so I started going down, looking at the budget of the TEA, where that came from, why there's been a growth in the Texas Education Agency by 50% on the employees and the number of hires. And I also saw the spending has gone up exponentially. And then I saw that the performance of the state, of the outcomes and the academic performance of the students was going down. And then I realized that much of the money that is funneled through the TEA comes from the legislature. So this bill, I support it because it gets back to the basics, and that's exactly what we need to do in our classrooms. We need to prioritize paying the teachers and training them on the money saved on the wasteful and harmful experiments going through the TEA that's paying the vendors, the public-private partnerships, the contracts, the consultants. All of that has taken priority over funding our classrooms. And that starts at the top. That comes from the state level, and my own party has been in power for the last couple of decades. So I'm encouraging us to support this bill so that we can get back to the basics. And I thank Representative Hinojosa, who brought up the idea of zero-based budgeting in a hearing that I attended several months back. And I said, yes, I will be happy to work with you. She asked me, would you be interested in that? Yes, that is why I'm here, crossing party lines to support her and her efforts to get us back to the basics. Thanks so much.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Bellsnyder, and I'm also a Republican, conservative, actually a former staffer here in the Texas Capitol. I worked for a very conservative Republican member of the Education Committee years ago. When I saw this bill, I actually got on social media and said, this is the thing that I would expect from Republicans and not Democrats. So I love this bill. It's good government. We have to figure out how to get more of our education dollars into the classroom. Our communities are in a crisis. I actually live in rural Texas. I drove 9 hours to be here today from the Texas Panhandle, where we are living the realities of what happens in this building, and our issues are serious. I actually told Representative Hinojosa that I attended a school board meeting on Tuesday night in our community where our school board passed an initiative to move to a 4-day school week. So those are the kinds of decisions that rural communities are having to make because the money is not where it's supposed to be, which is in the classrooms, supporting teachers, and making sure that we're delivering education to all students in this state. And so this bill is very important to that. Zero-based budgeting is a conservative, good government approach to efficiency in a state agency, and we need to be doing it. And so I'm happy to be here to support this bill and hope that we can get the representatives' Republican colleagues to sign on, and let's just do this for good government. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bryan Holubec. I'm a parent, a taxpayer. I serve on the board, the school board at Thrall ISD. And I appreciate Representative Hinojosa inviting me and letting me share my thought on this. And I want to simplify it to talk about before the state spends money on growing government and things that programs that are outside of what we've already decided is important. I'd like to refocus on something we all agreed on 2 years ago in the last session, and that was school safety. House Bill 3 in 2023 was passed to make our schools safe, and it has left the school districts across the state with an unfunded mandate that is causing additional financial strain on top of the already dire lack of funding for public schools. As we all know, that required an armed guard in every campus, and at $85,000 per individual, that's it's sorely underfunded at $10 per student and $15,000 per campus. So Texas schools need significantly more money this session to close the school safety funding, and I ask that they do that before they expand other programs. So every dollar spent on expansion of the TA bureaucracy is a dollar not allocated to securing our schools and protecting our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. We have here a chart that shows how the Texas Education Agency has grown over the last several years. And if you look from 2016, which is when Mike Morath started at the agency, it's grown almost 50%, about 400 employees more at the Texas Education Agency. We have passed out a graph that shows the increase in the Texas Education Agency budget. Again, those are dollars that don't get spent in the classroom when our most dire need, our crisis, is keeping good teachers in the classroom, attracting them, retaining them with competitive pay. Again, making sure we have money for school safety for our schools. That is the #1 concern of Texas parents, and taking care of our most vulnerable kids, our kids who qualify for a special education. And so I'm proud to stand with these parents, these mothers. We have been friend and foe to our school districts back home. We have not just a policy position on this, but a primal instinct and investment in our communities, because it's what matters most. It's our kids and our schools, and I'm proud to stand with these Texas parents in support of our kids and our neighborhood public schools. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Do you know what happened from 2011 to 12 with the drop off?
From 2011 to 12 is when money was cut. Was it $6 billion that was cut from the education budget that year? Hit really are economically disadvantaged the most, and you'll see if you look at, I think the funding is on the graph, that funding for our most vulnerable kids in the classroom never went back up, and it's still very, very low. But so yeah, that's what a cut to public education funding did.
There, and you lay out in this graph really where the increases in funding to TEA have been over the last few years. Are there specific areas where you think a decrease should occur in TEA's line items?
The bill lays out a systematic way to review all of that. It's the sunset process. TEA we have not passed a sunset bill for TEA since before 2005. We can't find a bill since before 2005. And so we need to have I don't want to point to anything in particular right now. I think those numbers are startling and pretty shocking when you think about the needs in our classroom. But I think we need a responsible, strategic review of the spending that's happening by the state with our public education dollars, our precious dollars that taxpayers are entrusting to us.
You had talks with TEA, if so, what have those been like, and what have you highlighted again just for cuts?
We have begun to have these conversations in committee. I've begun to really expose them. I think Texans don't know. My experience is that once Texans understand what's happening, that's where the power comes from and pressure starts to be put on this building to make real changes. But this was brought to me by a former trustee in another school district, community member who fights for our public schools. So these are things that we're just uncovering, but we are, it's being uncovered by lay people. We really need an institutional review of the spending that's happening there.
As we see, Texas Doge, going in on the departments here locally, IRS has come up, and some other departments. Do you think Texans will get on board with even more, cuts to spending in the TEA?
I think so. I have really found no one who thinks this is good, considering what's happening in the classroom. We frequently hear criticisms of our school districts when it comes to bureaucracy, right? But we need to take a look at ourselves and first do what we can at the state level to ensure that we're spending those taxpayer dollars wisely.
I want to ask you, just as an Austin ISD parent, and any other parents out there as well, Republican, no matter Democrat, Republican, whatever you are, it seems all parents that I've talked to want a good education in the public school system. Can you talk about some of
Right. I've seen, just in my experience, and I invite any parents who want to speak to this, but,
They shut 5
go
of our
ahead.
schools.
Go ahead, go,
I mean,
please
they
speak.
shut down 5 of my schools in Richardson ISD, and they also spent $10 million on refreshing iPads in Richardson ISD. So when Representative Hinojosa says we need to start at the top, I think if we start at the top, start with what I say the mothership of the TEA, and then we can work on looking at the spending at the local level, but really that can't change if we don't start at the TEA, because the mandates that come out from the legislature, and then the TEA embellishes that, adds on top of that, then that impacts the local school districts. And where they're closing campuses in rural areas, I know in Suzanne's area, that has to stop. And to support our neighborhood schools, that's really what we need to be doing, is pouring into our neighborhood schools instead of proposing all of this synthetic choice that the legislature we keep hearing about.
Yes, please.
In rural communities, it plays out a little differently, the funding issue, because what we're dealing with are things like delayed maintenance versus big cuts because we don't have the dollars or the numbers. My school district also we're proposing a bond to do things that they should be able to do within the budget every year, but we're having to pass a bond to do some of that deferred maintenance because there's not enough revenue. And we're also losing students in rural Texas. So, the per student funding, I mean, there are a lot of things playing out. So, but, that's what's great about local government and local control is that if the state will just fund properly, then local districts can solve the problems the best way that they need to. If they'll release us from some of the mandates, that's what I'm seeing. I actually attend every single school board meeting because I'm a part of I have a small newspaper, so I'm part of the local media. And if more people did that, they would understand where the problems really lie. It's not in the local districts. The state needs to get serious about education reform. They need to get serious about funding our schools properly, and they need to let our local folks do what they do best, which is educate our kids. So.
Thank you, Suzanne. In Austin, we just experienced a tax increase. We had to go to the voters for money for operating within our public schools because the state didn't increase the basic allotment in the last session, and we know that we are behind $1,340 when it comes to per student spending. That's how much we need to increase just to get back to 2019 spending. Had we increased $1,000 last session, which we knew we needed to do, again, just to deal with inflation, we would not have had to go to the taxpayers to increase taxes. So that tax increase, that property tax increase, was really a state property tax increase.
I was wondering if we could also talk about the impacts of recapture in this chart, how that has increased over the last few years, and obviously it's a huge impact on districts like Austin.
Right, and there's so many districts now that are paying into recapture, but Austin sends almost $1 billion a year, last time I checked, into recapture or Robin Hood. When we don't increase per student funding, our recapture payments go up, right? If increases in the basic allotment is the tide that raises all ships, right? Because what happens is all schools get more money for their kids' education, money that goes to the classroom, and that also cuts recapture. So investment into per student funding is actually a cut to Robin Hood recapture payments. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, and thank you all for being here and for your support for public schools. Thank you.